Welcome back to Revenge Silent.
My name is Tori Thatcher, and I'm 32 years old. 5 years ago, my mother called me 3 days before Thanksgiving and said 7 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about family. Don't come home this year. Victoria doesn't want drama. No explanation, no apology, just a door slammed shut on 27 years of trying to belong. I spent that Thanksgiving alone at a restaurant in Boston, watching happy families laugh together while I fought back tears over a cold turkey dinner. I had no idea that the strangers at the next table would become the family I'd always dreamed of. I had no idea that 5 years later, they'd be introduced at my wedding as the parents of the bride, while my biological parents stood watching uninvited, realizing they'd been replaced in every way that matters. Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if this story resonates with you. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Let me take you back to the phone call that changed everything. I remember exactly where I was standing when my phone rang. November 21st, 3 days before Thanksgiving. I was in my tiny studio apartment in Boston, surrounded by half-packed bags and the scent of the pumpkin candle I'd lit to get myself in the holiday spirit. I'd already bought my plane ticket home to Connecticut. Non-refundable, of course. Mom's name flashed on my screen. I smiled and picked up. "Hey, Mom. I was just about to—" "Tori." Her voice was flat, cold. "I need to tell you something." My stomach dropped. That tone never meant anything good. "What's wrong? Is Dad okay?" "Your father's fine." A pause. "Listen, I've been thinking, and don't come home this year." I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. "What do you mean?" "Victoria doesn't want drama. She's pregnant again, and she doesn't need the stress." I gripped the phone tighter. "Drama? What drama? I haven't even talked to Victoria in months." "Exactly." Mom's voice hardened. "And let's keep it that way. You know how you get." "How I get?" My voice cracked. "Mom, I literally just asked her last year why she didn't invite me to her baby shower. That's not drama. That's a question." "See? That's exactly what I mean. You always make everything about you." I stood there, frozen, watching the snow fall outside my window. 27 years old, and my mother was telling me I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving because I'd once asked why I was excluded. "Mom, I already bought my ticket." "Then get a refund." Her tone left no room for negotiation. "Victoria is pregnant. She doesn't need stress. You understand?" The line went dead. I understood perfectly. I'd always been the acceptable sacrifice. I wish I could say this was the first time. But as I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my useless plane ticket, the memories came flooding back like a highlight reel of disappointment. My 16th birthday party. I'd been planning it for months, a small gathering with my 3 closest friends. Mom promised we'd have cake and go bowling. But the morning of, Victoria called crying because she'd failed her calculus final and needed emotional support. My party was canceled. We spent the day consoling my sister instead. "Don't be dramatic, Tori. Your sister needs us more right now. You can celebrate next weekend." We never did. Then there was my college graduation. I'd worked so hard for that moment. 4 years of late nights and part-time jobs and scraping by on ramen. I was the first person in my family to graduate with honors. When I walked across that stage, I looked for my parents in the crowd. Their seats were empty. They showed up 2 hours late. Victoria had a routine prenatal checkup that couldn't be rescheduled. "You understand, sweetheart. Your sister's baby is more important than a ceremony. More important than me." That's what she meant. That's what she always meant. I learned early that complaining only made things worse. Don't be so sensitive. Stop making everything about yourself. Why can't you just be happy for your sister? So I stopped complaining. I became smaller, quieter. I thought if I was agreeable enough, easy enough, invisible enough, maybe then I'd finally earn their love. I was 27 years old, sitting in a cold apartment with a worthless plane ticket, and I finally realized the truth. There was no amount of small that would ever be small enough. I called my
más o
father. I
menos.
don't know what I expected.
Hola,
Maybe
te
some
llamo una
small part of me still believed he'd
hija.
stand up for me,
Y luego
just this once.
cri.
The phone rang 4 times before he answered.
Me
Hey,
sigue
kiddo.
doliendo la
His voice was
pierna,
cautious.
de
He already
hecho,
knew.
entrenando
Dad,
me
did Mom tell
molesta
you?
otra vez
A
bastante
long
la
pause. I could
pierna.
hear the TV in the background,
Pero
probably a football
bueno,
game. She mentioned it. And you're okay with this? You don't think maybe I should be allowed
enterramos.
at Thanksgiving with
No,
my own
todavía
family?
enterrado no está.
Another pause,
Incluso a
longer this
veces.
time. You know how your mother is, Tori. She's just trying to keep the peace. By excluding me? It's not like that. Then what is it
Hola,
like, Dad?
Diana.
Tell me.
Hola,
Because from where I'm
Rodrigo.
standing, it looks like you're all choosing Victoria over me. Again, silence. I could hear him breathing. I could almost see him sitting in his recliner, rubbing his forehead the way he always did when he wanted to disappear from a conversation.
Eres mi hermosa,
Dad, do you want me
gracias.
there? 5 seconds passed.
Pediste
10.
al entrenador.
I think
No,
he cleared his
daño
throat.
no. Sea
I think
bueno.
it's better if you listen to your mother this year.
Lo de
Something inside me went
siempre.
quiet.
Me
Not sad, not
molesta
angry,
y
just
bueno, pues no
empty.
puedo estirar
Okay, Dad.
bien.
Tori, don't be like. I said, okay.
Pero
I hung
bueno,
up.
me
He didn't
molesta
call
un
back.
poquito menos.
I sat in my
Así que a lo
apartment as the sun
mejor
went
va a
down,
menos.
watching the
No lo
shadows stretch
sé.
across my floor. My father had a chance to choose me, to say one word in my defense, and he chose silence instead. He was always in the middle, I
Eso
realized.
sí,
He
la
just always chose to stand on
espalda
their side. But as the darkness settled
me
in,
duele,
something
pero
else settled
la
too. A quiet
tengo todavía
decision.
un
If I wasn't
poco
welcome at their table, I'd make my own Thanksgiving.
así tocada
Thanksgiving Day arrived
porque
gray and cold.
hicimos un
I
montón
woke
de
up in my
cosas de
studio apartment to the
espalda.
sound of my neighbor's family arriving. Footsteps overhead, children laughing, the muffled
De la
warmth of
pierna yo
voices I
digo
couldn't
que
make
entonces
out.
perdimos
The
más.
smell of
Ah,
something delicious
gracias.
drifted through the vents.
Gracias por
Someone
el
was making
apoyo,
stuffing.
Juanma.
I made instant coffee and sat by the window, watching the snow fall on the empty street below.
Hola,
My phone stayed
Caleb.
silent all morning. No calls, no texts, not even a happy Thanksgiving
¿Soy
from
yo
anyone
o
in
tú
my
eres cada
family.
día con más ojos de
Around noon, I made
verano?
the mistake of opening
Bueno,
Instagram. Victoria had
este
posted a
top no
photo.
tiene mucho de
The whole
verano,
family
¿eh?
around the dining table. Mom, Dad, Victoria, her
Feliz
husband Brad, their 2-year-old son in a tiny turkey sweater. Everyone was smiling. The caption read, "So grateful for my
Hola,
family. These are the
yo.
people who matter most." I zoomed in on the
Espero que me
photo,
chilles.
counted the place settings. 4 adults, 1 toddler, 5 chairs. There wasn't even an empty seat where I should have been. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd
Hola,
erased me, like I'd
Leocolo.
never existed
¿Me
at all.
puedes dejar
I closed the
dejar
app,
fuera?
stared at the ceiling.
Se tira
I thought
ahí
about ordering
toda la
delivery and
mañana.
spending the day in
Toda la
bed.
mañana está
That's what I
enchufado.
deserved, right? A sad meal alone in my dark apartment, feeling sorry for
Entonces
myself.
eran
That's what the
streams
dramatic daughter
de
gets.
puro serles
But
de la
something in me
uni.
refused. No, I wasn't going to sit here and let them
Puro
win. I wasn't going to let their
hater.
rejection turn me into exactly what they accused me of being, a sad, bitter, dramatic mess. I grabbed my coat. If I was going to eat Thanksgiving dinner alone, I was going to
Hola,
do it somewhere with
Pablo.
actual food, with light, with life. I just had to find a restaurant that was still open. Harborview Grill was one of those old Boston institutions, dark wood, brass fixtures,
No,
the kind of place that
hoy me
still had
apetece
cloth
más
napkins
estar
and candles on
sentada.
every
No me
table.
molesta la pierna.
More importantly,
Me
it was one
molesta
of the
solo
few
cuando la
restaurants in the city
estiro.
that stayed open on Thanksgiving.
Pero
When
de
I
lo
pushed through the
normal no me
door, the
molesta
warmth hit
ya.
me like a wave. The smell of roasted turkey and fresh bread, the soft clink of glasses, and everywhere, families. Couples with
Ay, espera,
grandparents,
este no
parents with
está
children,
puesto.
groups of friends who laughed like they'd known each other forever. The
Un
restaurant hummed
momento.
with the sound of people who belonged
Un
somewhere.
momento que lo
The
pongo.
hostess
Es
looked at me
que
with barely
lo
concealed
tenía
pity.
puesto
Just
reinicio el
one tonight?
ordenador
Just
porque
one. She led me to a
intenté
tiny
arreglar lo
two-top in the
del
corner,
móvil,
squeezed between
pero
the kitchen door and a
al
large family that took
reiniciarlo
up
se me
3
olvidó poner
tables pushed
algunas
together.
cosas.
I could have touched their chairs if I reached out. Your server will be
Hombre,
right with you.
aprovechame
I sat down, opened the
logra...
menu,
No,
tried to look
Juanma,
like this
es
was a
que
choice. The family next to me was
intentas
celebrating hard.
hacer
An older
las
couple at the head of the
cosas a
table,
veces para
probably in their
quedar
late 60s,
bien y
a
las
middle-aged man with
haces
his wife and
mal,
2 kids, and a
casi
younger
que
man around
parece
30 who kept
aposta.
making everyone laugh. 3 generations, easy. They passed
Entonces,
dishes back and forth without asking. They interrupted each other in the way that only people who truly love each other can.
hola,
I
ya sé
watched them out of
que
the corner of my eye
sí,
and
lo
felt something
he
crack
visto
open in my chest.
reciente.
This is what family is supposed to look like. The server arrived with a bread basket and a tight smile. The Thanksgiving
Me
special?
encanta tu salón, me
Please.
parece tan
I was going
clean
to get
para
through this
confort.
dinner. I
Ay,
was going to be
gracias.
fine. I wasn't fine. My turkey arrived. Golden skin, cranberry sauce,
Hola,
a perfect scoop of
creador.
mashed potatoes.
Hoy
It looked like a
viniste a
magazine
dejarle
photo.
jugar a los
I couldn't
gatos.
taste any of it. I sat there pushing food around my plate, trying not to look at the family beside me, trying not to think about my own family
No.
gathered around their table in Connecticut, laughing and passing the gravy without a single thought
Es
about the
que
daughter
el
they'd
juego de los gatos
discarded.
me cansa un
And
poco a
suddenly
la
I
vista.
understood something I'd been avoiding for 27 years.
Lo
This
pudiste
wasn't about
arreglar.
Thanksgiving. This wasn't about Victoria's
No, tengo
pregnancy
que
or Mom's need for
ver
peace.
porque es que
This was
no he
about a
tenido
pattern
tiempo
so
para
deep
hacer
it had shaped my
tantas
entire life.
pruebas.
I had spent 27 years trying to earn a place at their table, bending
Tengo que
myself into smaller
probar
and smaller
otras
shapes,
cosas.
swallowing my hurt,
A ver si
apologizing for
funcionan
having
bien
feelings,
y se me
staying quiet when I
conectan,
should have
porque si
spoken,
no,
speaking up only to be
porque es
told I
que
was too
la
much.
cosa es que ni
And what had it
siquiera,
gotten
no es
me?
que no
A
me
corner table,
detecte
a
las
meal alone, an
o
Instagram photo with
cualquier
no empty
móvil, es
chair.
que ni
If I
siquiera
kept
se
going
me
like
pone a
this, if I
cargar.
kept trying to be small enough, quiet
Entonces,
enough,
claro, eso me
agreeable
parece
enough,
muy raro.
what would I have left?
Entonces
At some
quiero
point, there'd
conectar
be nothing
otras
left to
cosas
shrink.
para ver
The tears
si
came
es
before I could stop them.
mi
I turned my
móvil
face toward the window,
o mi
hoping no one
USB.
would notice. I grabbed my napkin and pressed it to my eyes, trying to be
Hola,
invisible, trying
Juan.
to disappear like I always did. Honey? I froze. A woman's voice,
Lo que pasa es que
warm,
esto otra
concerned.
vez terminó, ¿eh?
Are you
Listo, o
okay?
sea que...
I looked up. The older woman from the family next to me was standing beside my table. Silver hair, kind eyes, a face that somehow looked like it had spent a lifetime actually listening to people.
Pues sí, de
She was
reaccionar.
looking at me like I mattered.
No sé,
I'm
no
fine,
sé.
I said
Ya
automatically.
veré después.
Just
Quedó
allergies.
súper roja. Me
The woman
entran
raised
los
one eyebrow,
calores.
not judging, just knowing. Allergies don't usually make people cry into their napkin on Thanksgiving. I let out a sound that was half
Ahora
laugh,
tipo
half sob.
duro.
That obvious? Only to someone who's paying attention. She had a gentle voice, but there was steel underneath. The kind of
Hola,
woman who'd seen
José.
things.
Hola, Rimanino.
I'm
Hola,
Eleanor.
Andrea. Hola, Juan.
Tori. Well, Tori.
Necesito
She glanced back at her
saludar.
family, then at me.
Saludado ya, Juan.
No
Si
one
no
should
te
eat alone on
saludo.
this day. Why don't you come join us? I shook my head immediately. Oh no, I couldn't. I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding. I'm
Ya,
inviting.
bueno, no me
She
tengáis
smiled.
en
There's a
cuenta.
difference. I really appreciate it, but my husband tells terrible jokes, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. And my son Marcus keeps trying to start political
Eso como
debates.
la noche
You might
de
as well come suffer with
Reyes.
us. From the big
Te
table,
pones
the older
nerviosa la
man,
noche
her
de
husband, I assumed,
Reyes.
waved at me. She won't take no for an answer. Trust me. 43 years, and I've
Puse
never
un
won an
vídeo para
argument.
que él
The
fuera
younger son,
alerta de que
Marcus
las bromas
apparently,
le van a
grinned.
encantar.
He's not wrong. I looked at my cold turkey, my empty table,
Como
my
que
napkin still damp with tears. Then I looked at Eleanor Morrison and her warm eyes and her family that somehow had room for a stranger. Okay, I heard myself say. If you're sure I'm not, I'm sure. Eleanor put her hand on my shoulder. Come on. We just opened another bottle of wine, and there's way too much pie. I stood up on shaky legs and followed her to the table, not knowing that this single moment, this small act of kindness from a woman I'd never met, was about to change the entire trajectory of my life. They made room for me like I'd always been there. Someone pulled up a chair. Someone else handed me a plate. Before I could even sit down, I had a glass of wine in my hand and a warm roll on my plate. "I'm Richard," the older man said, shaking my hand firmly. "This is my wife, Eleanor, our son Daniel and his wife, Sarah, their kids, Emma and Lucas, and our youngest, Marcus."
Me
"Hi."
encanta.
I gave an awkward little wave to the table. "I'm Tori. Thank you so much for—" "What do you do, Tori?" Daniel asked, passing me the mashed potatoes. "I'm a graphic designer, freelance mostly." "That's wonderful," Sarah said. "I can barely draw a stick figure." "Mom, stick figures are easy," Emma said. She looked about 8. "Even I can do that." Everyone laughed. Not at anyone, with each other. It was such a foreign sound. Marcus caught my eye from across the table. He was around my age, maybe a little older, with dark hair and an easy smile. "Fair warning, my dad's about to tell a joke." "I am not," Richard protested. "He is," Eleanor said. Richard grinned. "Okay, fine. What did the turkey say to the computer?" "Dad, no," Daniel groaned. "Google, Google, Google." The kids burst into giggles. Sarah rolled her eyes. Marcus shook his head. And I actually laughed. A real laugh. For the first time all day. Richard raised his wine glass. "A toast to unexpected guests who make our table complete." Everyone raised their glasses, including me. I looked around at these people, strangers, all of them, until 15 minutes ago, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Warmth, acceptance, belonging. I didn't know families could feel like this. After the main course, while the kids ran off to explore the restaurant and the men argued about football, Eleanor moved to the chair next to mine. "How are you doing?" she asked quietly. "Really?" I looked down at my plate. "Better. This is really nice. Thank you." "You're welcome." She took a sip of her wine. "But that's not what I asked." Something about her directness made me want to be honest. "I'm okay. I'm just having a hard Thanksgiving." "Do you want to tell me why you're really here alone?" I hesitated. The truth felt too pathetic to say out loud. My own mother told me not to come home. My sister thinks I'm drama. My father chose silence over me. But Eleanor waited, patient, no judgment in her eyes. "My mom called me 3 days ago," I finally said. "Told me not to come home for Thanksgiving. My sister is pregnant and she didn't want drama." Drama? That's what they call it when I ask questions they don't want to answer. Eleanor nodded slowly. "I see. It's fine," I added quickly. "I mean, it's not fine, but it's not fine." Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. "Can I tell you something I learned in 30 years as a family lawyer?" I blinked. "You're a lawyer?" "Retired. Family law," she smiled. "I've seen every kind of family dysfunction you can imagine, and I've learned that the people who accuse you of causing drama are usually the ones creating it. They just need someone to blame." The words hit me like a physical force. "You're not the problem, Tori." Eleanor put her hand over mine. "You never were." I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. Those were the words I'd needed to hear my entire life. Hey, I want to pause here for a second. If you're watching this and you've ever been blamed for causing drama just because you asked to be treated fairly, I see you. I want to know, have you ever been made the scapegoat in your family? Type your answer in the comments. And if this story is hitting close to home, please hit that like button so more people can find it. Now let me tell you what happened next. The evening wound down slowly, the way good dinners do. Pie was served, coffee was poured. The kids fell asleep on Sarah's lap, exhausted from running circles around the restaurant. When the check came, I reached for my wallet, but Richard waved me off. "Please," he said, "our treat." "I can't let you. You can and you will." He smiled. "Consider it a Thanksgiving tradition. We always buy dinner for new friends." As we gathered our coats and prepared to leave, Eleanor pressed something into my hand. A small card, cream-colored, with elegant black text. I looked down. Eleanor
pero
Morrison,
sí, yo me fui a
JD,
dormir
family law,
antes
retired.
por culpa
Below
del
that, a phone number and
destino.
an address in
Porque
Brookline.
digo, bueno, me voy a
If
ir
you
a
ever need to
dormir
talk, she
antes
said, call
porque si
me.
no
I
me
mean
va a
it.
despertar a las
I
8 de la mañana
thank
porque
you.
es que
Richard appeared beside us, shrugging on
ayer
his coat. Sunday dinners,
a
every
las
week at our place.
8
You're
de la
welcome
mañana
anytime.
miro el
I
y
shook my
tuve un
head. That's so
sueño que a las
kind, but I
8 de la
couldn't.
mañana
She
me
could,
despertó el
Marcus
vecino
said,
tocando
joining
la
the group.
guitarra.
And she should. Mom never says things she doesn't mean. Trust me.
Así que
Eleanor squeezed my hand.
estuve
Family
todo
isn't
el día
blood,
con
Tori. It's
sueño.
showing up. I stood
Y
there in the restaurant
luego
lobby, holding a business card from a woman I'd met 3
como
hours ago,
entré
receiving an open
encima,
invitation from a family I
pues
had no claim to.
tenía bastante sueño
Outside,
para
the
irme
snow
a
was
dormir.
falling
Entonces digo,
harder.
bueno, me voy
Through
a
the window, I
dormir
could see families hurrying
antes.
to their cars,
Por
children carried on
culpa del
shoulders,
vecino, porque
grandparents
sé que
clutching
es que
to-go
como me
containers of
vaya a
leftover
dormir
pie.
tarde y encima
I
me
looked back at the
despierte
Morrisons,
a las 8 de
Richard
la
helping
mañana
Eleanor
de
with her
nuevo,
scarf,
es que
Daniel herding sleepy children,
voy a estar
Marcus waiting by
súper
the door with an expectant
cansada.
look.
Bueno,
Okay, I said. Maybe I'll stop by
pues
sometime. Eleanor smiled like
he
she'd known
dormido
I'd say yes
fatal
all along. I had no
porque me he
idea I'd just met
forzado
my
a irme
future
a dormir
family. I didn't
antes.
go to
He
Sunday
dormido
dinner the next week,
fatal.
or the week after that. It felt too strange, too forward, too much like I was imposing on someone else's family. But Eleanor called. Just to check in, she
No ha
said, just
tocado
to
la
see how I was doing.
guitarra hoy,
By early December, I finally
pero
accepted the
sí que
invitation.
me han
That first
despertado a las
Sunday, I stood on the
7 de
Morrisons'
la
porch in Brookline
mañana
for
porque
5
como
full
siempre
minutes
se
before I worked
despiertan
up the courage to knock.
para irse a
The
trabajar,
house
pues
was
me
exactly what I'd
despiertan.
imagined, a beautiful Victorian with a
Y yo,
wraparound
bueno,
porch and lights in every window. It looked like the kind of place
el
where
ojo
good things happened.
anterior
Eleanor
para
opened the door before I could change my mind. There you are. She pulled me into a hug like it was the most natural thing in the world. We saved
el
you a
vecino
seat.
toca la
That
guitarra
was
a
the
las 8
first
de
of
la
many
mañana,
Sundays.
sí. A
Over the
las
next 6
8,
months,
a
I
las
became a regular at the
9,
Morrison dinner table. Richard taught me to play
pero
chess,
suele
even though I
empezar
lost
a
every
las
single
8
game.
en punto
Eleanor showed
de
me
la
her
mañana.
secret pie crust recipe, the one she swore
Hola
she'd never written down.
Jesús.
Daniel's kids started calling me Aunt Tori
Hola
without anyone
Matei.
telling them to.
Seguime
And
al
Marcus?
televisor.
Marcus and I became friends.
Ay,
Real friends.
está
The kind who
controlado y
texted
chismes
random thoughts at 2 a.m. and argued about
controladísimos.
movies and sat next to each other at dinner without anyone having to arrange it. I didn't hear from my biological family once. Not a call, not a text, not even a Christmas card. For the first time in my life, I stopped noticing.
Eso era cuando vivía
Because for
con
the
mis
first
padres.
time, I wasn't performing for love. I wasn't shrinking myself to fit into someone else's expectations. I was
¿Vas a
just
beber leche antes de
loved.
dormir?
It felt like finally coming home. One spring
¿Por qué te
afternoon,
funciona
about
eso?
8 months after that first Thanksgiving, Eleanor and I were sitting on her back porch. The garden was just starting to bloom, tulips pushing up through the soil, birds fighting over the feeder. Richard was inside, watching a game with Marcus. We could hear them shouting at the TV. Have you heard from your parents? Eleanor asked. I watched a robin land on the fence.
Es que
No,
el año
and
pasado
I
fue
haven't reached out
igual.
either. She nodded,
El
no
año
judgment in her
pasado,
eyes. Do you want to? I thought about it, really thought about it.
a veces
Sometimes, I
tocaba la
admitted.
guitarra,
In the
pero
middle of the
luego
night,
había
mostly.
un parón.
I'll think about calling
Un
my
parón
mom and
muy
trying to
grande.
explain, but then I remember there's nothing to explain.
Entonces,
She knows what she did.
quiero
She just
esperar
doesn't think
un
it was
poquito
wrong.
más
That's a hard thing to accept. It is.
para ver
I pulled
si
my
ya
cardigan
llega
tighter.
un punto que
I keep
digo,
waiting to
esto
feel
es
guilty.
insostenible,
Everyone
es que
says you should forgive your
me
family
deja
no
de
matter what.
descansar bien. Y
Blood is thicker than
escribirle
water and all that.
un mensaje
You know, I've never believed that. Eleanor took a sip of her tea.
tipo, oye,
In my career, I helped a lot of people find legal
tu
recognition for the
guitarra
families
tan
they've built,
pronto
not the ones they were born
molesta,
into.
no deja
I turned to look
dormir,
at her.
¿sabes? Y
What do you
dejarlo
mean?
en el
She
buzón.
smiled, soft and knowing. Just that the law recognizes what the heart already
Para
knows.
interceptor,
That family can be created, not just inherited.
como que te
There are ways to
despertaron,
make those
nada,
bonds official,
hablando,
if a person wants to. I didn't
abriendo
fully understand what
cajones,
she was hinting at.
puertas o cosas
Not yet.
así.
Something to think about, Eleanor said. Whenever
No
you're
quiero
ready.
dormir con tapones
She
en
patted
los
my hand and
oídos.
changed the subject to her tomato plants. But her words stayed
Para
with me.
Ricardo,
They would take root slowly, and bloom at exactly the right time. It happened so naturally that I almost didn't notice it
Bueno,
happening.
podrías
2 years
decir
after that
puras
first
fiestas
Thanksgiving,
por todos
Marcus and I
lados y
weren't
la
just friends
música casi
anymore.
toda
We
la
were something more.
madrugada.
Something that had grown so gradually that when we finally acknowledged it, it felt less like a beginning and
Bueno,
more like a recognition of what had always been there. He asked me to dinner at
depende de
Harborview
dónde
Grill,
vivas,
the
¿no?
same restaurant where we'd met. "This feels circular," I said,
Valencia.
sliding into the booth. "That's the point." Marcus was nervous. I could tell by the way he
Toda
kept adjusting
mi
his napkin.
carrera creo que
"I
era
wanted to bring you back to
acústica.
where it all started." "Where what
Es que se
started?"
escucha muy
He reached across
fuerte.
the table and took my
Y yo
hand.
creo que la tiene
"Tori,
conectada
I've been trying to figure
a...
out how to say this for months." He took a breath. "I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you, every single
algo. A
day."
lo mejor
My heart
tiene
stopped.
conectado a un
"Marcus,
pequeño altavoz.
I know your
O a
family
lo
hurt you.
mejor
I know you're scared of
está
people
en...
who are supposed to love you
O
letting you
sea,
down."
tiene que estar
His eyes
parada
were
para
steady
ti.
on mine.
Pero
"But I'm
hace
not
mucho
going
eco, en
anywhere.
plan,
I never
no,
have
no es
been."
que suene muy
He pulled out a
flojito,
small
es que
velvet
suena
box. "Tori
bastante.
Thatcher, will you marry me?" I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I looked at this man who'd been my friend first, my confidant second,
Dile, me
my
molestas
rock through
encima
2 years of
tocas fatal.
healing,
No, no,
and I saw my
toca bien,
future.
toca bien.
"Yes," I whispered. "Yes."
Why didn't you
He
swing
slipped
your
the ring on
leg?
my finger.
Because
The restaurant erupted in applause. I'd been so focused on
Tuesdays
Marcus I hadn't even noticed the
and
other diners watching.
Thursdays I have
And then I saw
training.
them. In the corner booth, Richard and Eleanor, champagne already poured, beaming at us like they'd known all along.
Creo
Mom
que
couldn't
entre todos
resist,
los
Marcus
hechos
laughed.
planteamos
I was going to officially become a Morrison.
un
The wedding planning began
madrazo de
immediately.
la
Venue
nada.
options, catering tastings, flower
No,
consultations. It was overwhelming and exciting and
tampoco
everything
hay
I'd never let myself dream
que
about. But one question
llevarlo
kept
al
me up at night.
extremo.
The wedding invitations would need a line for parents of the bride. And I had no idea what to write there.
Tatuaje.
Robert and Linda Thatcher? They hadn't
Vale.
spoken to me in over 2 years, hadn't called on my birthday, hadn't acknowledged my existence in any way. I couldn't put their names on my wedding invitation. They hadn't earned that honor. I was pacing in the Morrisons' living room one evening when Eleanor found me. "What's troubling you, sweetheart?" I told her about the invitation, about the impossible line I couldn't figure out how to fill. Eleanor sat down and patted the cushion beside her. "There's something I mentioned to you once, about legal recognition for chosen family. Do you remember?" I nodded slowly. "You said the law recognizes family that's created, not just inherited." "Adult adoption," Eleanor said gently. "It's a legal process where a consenting adult is formally adopted by another family. It creates a legal parent-child relationship, new birth certificate, new legal next of kin status, everything." My heart was pounding. That's a real thing? Very real. I've helped many people through the process. I looked at this woman who'd pulled me into her family on the loneliest night of my life, who'd fed me Sunday dinners and taught me about pie crust and shown me what a mother could be. "Eleanor," my voice cracked, "would you and Richard consider—" She pulled me into her arms before I could finish the sentence. "We've considered you our daughter since the first Thanksgiving," she whispered. "We were just waiting for you to be ready." The adoption process took several months. Paperwork, court appearances, legal filings. But with Eleanor guiding me through every step, it felt less like bureaucracy and more like a ceremony. When the judge signed the final order, I legally became Tori Morrison. I had a new birth certificate, new legal parents, a new family, on paper and in my heart. The wedding was set for the following June. We sent out invitations with the line I'd agonized over, now proudly printed: "Parents of the bride, Richard and Eleanor Morrison." I should have known the Thatcher family would eventually find out. 3 months before the wedding, my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, the first message from her in nearly 3 years. "Did you know Tori's getting married?" I stared at the screen, then I blocked the number. A week later, my mother called, 5 times in one day. I let every call go to voicemail. Finally, a text. Why didn't you tell us? We're your family. Call me back immediately. I read it twice, then I deleted it. 3 years of silence. 3 years of pretending I didn't exist. And now, suddenly, they remembered they had another daughter. I wasn't angry. I'd moved past anger long ago. I was just tired. Marcus found me staring at my phone that evening. Everything okay? My biological family found out about the wedding. Ah. He sat down beside me. What do you want to do? Nothing. I put the phone away. I don't owe them anything. Not an explanation, not an invitation, nothing. He nodded and pulled me close. Whatever you decide, I support you. But we both knew this wasn't over. The Thatchers weren't the kind of family who accepted being ignored. The question was, what would they do about it? She showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home, reviewing design proofs at my kitchen table, when the doorbell rang. I opened it without checking the peephole, a mistake I wouldn't make again. Tori. My mother stood in my hallway. She looked older than I remembered, grayer, more tired, but her eyes held the same disappointed expression I'd spent my childhood trying to erase. Mom. The word felt foreign in my mouth. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? She pushed past me into the apartment without being invited. What are you doing? Getting married without telling your own mother? We haven't spoken in 3 years. And whose fault is that? I closed the door slowly, counted to 5. Yours. It was your fault. You told me not to come home. Not to. That was one Thanksgiving. You can't still be upset about that. I'm not upset. I kept my voice calm. I've moved on. Linda's eyes swept across my living room, landing on the photos on my bookshelf. Me and Marcus at a beach. Me and Eleanor making pie. The whole Morrison family at Christmas. Me right in the center. Who are these people? My family. Her face contorted. I am your family. You were. I met her gaze evenly. You chose not to be. Remember? Victoria didn't want drama. That was years ago. And in those years, you never once called, never checked if I was alive, never acknowledged my existence. I felt eerily calm. So no, Mom, you don't get to show up now and act like you have a claim on me. I want an invitation to the wedding. No, her jaw dropped. Excuse me? You heard me? I walked to the door and opened it. You don't get to erase me and then demand a seat at my table. The wedding day dawned golden and perfect. June in Napa Valley. A vineyard with rolling hills and endless rows of grapevines. We'd chosen an outdoor ceremony with a reception in a beautiful stone barn, everything decorated with white roses and greenery. In the bridal suite, I stood before a full-length mirror while Eleanor adjusted my veil. You look beautiful, she said softly. Absolutely beautiful. I looked at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was calmer, stronger than the girl who'd sat alone in a restaurant 5 years ago. That girl hadn't believed she deserved to be loved. This woman knew better. On the vanity beside me sat a copy of the wedding program. I picked it up, reading the line I'd never thought I'd be able to write. Parents of the bride, Richard and Eleanor Morrison. Underneath, in smaller text, the family who chose her. Eleanor noticed me looking. Are you nervous? About marrying Marcus? No. I set down the program. About what might happen, a little. I'd hired security for the wedding, a quiet precaution. After Mom's visit to my apartment, I knew there was a chance she'd try something. Eleanor put her hands on my shoulders. Whatever happens today, you have a family who chose you. We will always choose you. Never forget that. I hugged her tight. I love you, Mom. It was the first time I'd called her that. The word came out naturally, like it had always been waiting. Eleanor's eyes glistened. I love you too, sweetheart. My daughter. Through the window, I could see guests arriving. Marcus was already at the altar looking nervous and handsome in his
Caí de
gray
la
suit.
página.
It was time. Whatever came next, I was ready. The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed of. Marcus waiting at the end of the aisle. Richard walking me toward him, steady and proud. The vows we'd written ourselves, words that made half the guests cry and the other half pretend they weren't crying. When Marcus slipped the ring on my finger and the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, I felt something click into place, like the last piece of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve my entire life.
Vale, Leo.
The reception was in full swing when the security guard found me.
Vale, ya lo
Mrs.
conseguí,
Morrison?
lo he conseguido.
He appeared at
No
my
sé por
elbow,
qué
discreet
no
and
iba bien
professional.
ahí.
There are 2 people at the entrance.
A lo mejor
They claim to be
estábamos
your
también
parents.
fallos.
I'd expected this. Part of me had been waiting for it all day. Marcus appeared beside me. What's going on? My biological parents are here. His expression hardened. I'll handle it. No. I took his hand. This is my moment. I'll handle it. I considered my options. I could have them removed. I could pretend they weren't there. I could avoid the confrontation entirely. But something in me said no. Let them see. Let them see what they lost. Let them see the family who stepped up when they stepped away. Let them witness the life I built without them. Let them in, I told the security guard. But don't seat them with the family. Put them in the back.
Espero que no se caiga muy directo.
Are you sure?
Ya.
Marcus asked. I'm sure. The guard nodded and disappeared.
Seis.
A few minutes later, I saw them. Linda and Robert Thatcher standing uncertainly at the edge of the reception, looking around at the 100+ people who were celebrating their daughter's wedding. Their daughter, who they hadn't spoken to in 3 years. The MC was about to make his announcement. Perfect timing. Okay, this is the moment. Before the big reveal, I have a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have let your biological parents into your wedding? Type yes or no in the comments. I want to know what you would have done. And if you're dying to see what happens next, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Now let me tell you about the moment everything changed. The MC stepped up to the microphone. The music softened. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. The room quieted. Guests turned toward the front. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Before we continue the celebration, I'd like to introduce some very special people. I watched my biological parents from across the room. Linda was craning her neck, trying to see. Robert stood behind her, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. They had no idea what was coming. Please join me in welcoming the parents of the bride. Linda straightened up. I could see her preparing to acknowledge the introduction, to accept the recognition she believed was rightfully hers. Richard and Eleanor Morrison! The room erupted in applause. Richard and Eleanor stood from the head table, beaming, waving to the guests. People cheered. Someone whistled. The photographer snapped photos. And across the room, my mother's face went white. I watched it happen in slow motion. The confusion, the disbelief, the moment she realized what those words meant. Richard and Eleanor Morrison, the family who chose Tori and whom Tori chose in return. Linda grabbed Robert's arm. What did he just say? Robert looked stunned, speechless. Around them, guests clapped and smiled, completely unaware that the older couple in the back had any connection to the bride at all. To everyone else at this wedding, Richard and Eleanor Morrison were simply what they appeared to be, my parents. Linda's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. She looked at the happy couple accepting congratulations, then at me standing with my husband, and the truth finally settled over her like a cold wave. She had been replaced. Completely. Officially. Legally. And everyone in this room knew it except her. Linda pushed through the crowd before I could stop her. She reached me just as the applause was dying down. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild. Robert trailed behind her, looking like he wanted to disappear. What is going on? Linda's voice was a harsh whisper. Who are those people? I kept my voice calm, steady. My legal parents. I was adopted 2 years ago. You... what?
Memories.
She actually staggered back a step. You can't just replace us. I didn't replace you. I looked at her evenly. You
Creo que
abandoned me
mejor que
first.
6.
We never abandoned you. You told me not to come home.
Sí, bueno,
You
que
chose
13 se
Victoria.
supone que es el número
Every
de la
time. For
suerte.
27 years. The guests nearest to us had noticed the confrontation. Conversations died.
Hola,
Heads turned. That's not fair, Linda started. Fair? I felt Marcus move to my side, a solid, reassuring presence.
¿Qué tal el día?
You want to talk about fair?
Bien.
I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was loud enough on its own. I spent 27 years trying to earn a place in your family. You know what I got?
Mi nuevo
An
favorito
Instagram
es
photo with
13.
no empty
¿En
chair.
serio?
A Thanksgiving dinner alone. 3 years of
Pero,
silence.
hay
I'm still your
sitios
mother, Linda's voice
asiáticos
cracked.
que el 13
Not
ni
legally.
siquiera existe,
I held up
por
my left
ejemplo,
hand, both rings glinting in the reception
en
lights.
un
Not
edificio no
emotionally,
existe el piso
not
número
anymore.
13.
Around us, the room had gone quiet. 100 pairs of eyes watched us. Linda looked around, suddenly aware of the audience. Her cheeks burned red. This is humiliating, she hissed. Then leave. My voice was soft,
Gracias,
final.
tanto. Sí,
You showed up
bueno,
uninvited to my
depende.
wedding.
Una te
You
puede
don't get to be the
salir
victim here.
30 y otra
She
te puede
stared at me like she was
salir
seeing a
3
stranger.
solo,
Maybe she
¿sabes?
was. The daughter who never fought back had finally stopped shrinking. And then, for the first time in my entire life,
Pero
my father
muchas
spoke up.
gracias.
Tori. His voice was rough, broken.
Si
I'm
rosa de
sorry.
Navidad,
I turned to
¿cómo
look
es
at
que
him.
no hay
Really
un
look at him.
premio?
Robert Thatcher had aged more than 5 years should account for. His hair was
Claro que
grayer,
hay premio.
his shoulders
El
slumped,
premio
but his eyes were wet with tears. I'd never seen my father
tener
cry,
la
not once in
recompensa
27 years.
de
I'm sorry, he said again.
darme dinero.
I should have done better. Something cracked inside my chest.
En el 4,
Not healing,
el 13 le
just
da igual,
recognition of an old
es
wound.
cosa
I know, Dad.
accidental.
I was the coward.
Ah,
His voice trembled.
sí,
I
en el
always
4.
was. I knew how your
No
mother
sabía.
treated you, how Victoria treated you, and I stood there. I let it happen. Linda grabbed his arm. Robert, what are you? He shook her off, kept his eyes on me. You were my daughter. You were my little girl, and I let them make you feel like you didn't matter. A tear rolled down his cheek. I'm so sorry. The words I'd waited 3 decades to hear, and they came too late. I know you're sorry, Dad. My voice was gentle but firm. But sorry
Pues
doesn't
no,
undo the
muy
years you stood by
mal.
and watched. Sorry
Tienes que
doesn't give
estar
me
viendo
back
a
my
mí y
childhood.
no
Sorry
intentando
doesn't
jugar
make
al
this okay.
Fortnite.
I know. He nodded, wiping his
A
eyes.
ver,
I know it doesn't.
entonces, es que
Eleanor
no puedo
appeared at my
poner
shoulder.
ese otro
She didn't say
audio,
anything,
no.
just placed her hand on my arm. A quiet reminder that I wasn't alone. Linda stared at Eleanor with barely concealed hostility. You,
El premio
she
es la
spat.
satisfacción de
You're
dar
the one who
dinero,
stole my daughter.
efectivamente.
Eleanor's expression didn't change. I didn't steal anything, Mrs. Thatcher. Then what do you call this? Richard Morrison stepped forward, positioning himself beside his wife. Richard Morrison wasn't a confrontational man. In the years I'd known him, I'd never once heard him raise his voice. But when he spoke now, there was a steel in his
Pues
tone
ahí
that
está muy
silenced
entretenido,
everyone.
muy-
I think it's
muy
time for you folks
entretenido
to leave.
soy yo.
Linda's jaw dropped.
Mis
Who are you to
directos.
tell us? I'm her father. Richard's voice carried across the quiet reception. Legally and in every way that matters. You stole our daughter! Richard shook his head. Calm. Certain.
¿Quién te no?
No, ma'am. We didn't steal
¿Quién
anything.
te?
You gave her away. We just picked up what you threw out. Linda flinched like she'd been slapped. 5 years
Te
ago,
pones a jugar
Richard
juegos de
continued,
navegador.
this young woman was sitting alone in a
Una vez
restaurant on
en
Thanksgiving
diciembre
because her
por
own
mis
family told her
pobres.
she wasn't welcome.
Ah,
My
nada
wife
es
invited her to our
visible.
table.
No,
We
pero
fed her.
da
We talked to her.
igual, tú
We
puedes
treated her like a
poner
human
un
being.
juego y puedes
He stepped closer to Linda, his voice dropping. Do you know
ponerlo
what
que
she
no
told us
salga en
that
tu
night?
actividad.
She said she couldn't remember the last time she felt like she mattered to someone. 27 years old, and she couldn't remember ever feeling wanted by her own family. Linda opened her mouth. No sound came out. We didn't steal your daughter. We just showed her what family is supposed to look like. The rest was her choice. He turned to face the gathered crowd. Now, this is my daughter's wedding day, the happiest day of her life, and I won't let anyone ruin it. He nodded to the security guards, who had been standing discreetly nearby. Please escort these people out. As the guards approached, Richard put his arm around me. Tori is a Morrison now, he said quietly, and Morrisons protect their own. This is what a father sounds like. Before the security guards could lead them away, I held up my hand. Wait. Everyone froze. Linda looked at me with something like hope in her eyes. Maybe she thought I was having second thoughts. Maybe she thought I'd relent. I walked toward my biological parents, stopped an arm's length away. Mom, Dad. The words still felt strange in my mouth when directed at them. I need you to understand something. Linda's chin lifted. What? I don't hate you. Whatever she'd expected me to say, that wasn't it. I don't hate you, I repeated. I've made peace with who you are. You're not villains. You're just people who couldn't love me the way I needed to be loved. People who chose comfort over fairness. People who let one daughter become invisible so the other could shine. Robert was crying again. Linda's face was a mask. But I've also made peace with who I am. I stood straighter. And who I am is someone who deserves to be chosen, not as a backup, not as an afterthought, chosen first. I looked at them both. The parents I'd spent my childhood trying to please, the family I'd shrunk myself to fit into. You didn't choose me, they did. I gestured to the Morrisons, and I choose them. The room was silent. 100 guests watched this moment, and not one of them moved. Linda opened her mouth to speak. I didn't let her. I'm not erasing you from my history. I'm just not giving you a seat at my table anymore. And that's not revenge. That's just the natural consequence of your choices. I nodded to security. Goodbye, Mom, Dad. As they were escorted out, the wedding guests began to applaud. Not for the drama, for me. The rest of the wedding was everything I'd hoped for. We danced, we laughed, we cut the cake while everyone cheered. Marcus twirled me around the dance floor until I was dizzy with joy. For those few hours, I let myself forget about the confrontation and just be happy. But the next morning, my phone started blowing up. Texts from cousins I hadn't heard from in years, messages from aunts and uncles I barely knew. The extended Thatcher family had heard about what happened at the wedding, and they had opinions. How could you do this to your mother? Family is family no matter what. You've broken your father's heart. I deleted them without responding. But then came a text from someone unexpected. My Aunt Patricia, my father's younger sister. Tori, I heard what happened. I want you to know. I'm proud of you. I stared at the screen. I always knew Linda and Victoria treated you wrong. I tried to say something once, and your mother stopped speaking to me for a year. But you deserved better. You always did. My eyes burned. I typed back, thank you. That means more than you know. On Facebook, Linda posted a long, dramatic status about ungrateful children and modern families who don't understand loyalty. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That evening, I blocked every phone number and social media account connected to the Thatcher family. Not out of anger, out of peace. Marcus found me on the balcony of our honeymoon suite. You okay? I looked out at the vineyard spreading golden in the sunset. Yeah. I leaned into him. I really am. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of people who didn't want to carry me. I was finally free. 2 weeks after the wedding, a handwritten letter arrived at our new address. The return address said Victoria Thatcher Collins. My sister's handwriting, loopy, perfect, exactly like I remembered from birthday cards that always felt more like obligations than affection. I almost threw it away unopened.
El
but
título
something
del
made me
último
sit
es
down at the kitchen
animado.
table and read it.
Con
Dear Tori,
algunos
I don't know if you'll read
emoticonos
this.
así,
Honestly, I
como
wouldn't blame you
color,
if you
pues
didn't.
queda
But I had to
más,
try. Mom told me what
más
happened at your
bonito.
wedding. She's devastated. Dad
Además,
hasn't
ese
been the same since he
corazón me
came home.
encanta. No
I
sé
think
cómo lo
seeing
haréis
you, seeing how
vosotros,
happy you
porque
are without
según
us,
en qué
broke something in
Windows se
him.
vea
I know we haven't always had the best
o qué
relationship,
versión de Windows
but you have to
o lo
understand.
que sea se ven
Mom and Dad were
diferentes,
just trying to
pero a
keep the
mí este
peace.
emote me encanta.
I never meant for you to feel excluded. You always made everything so difficult, always asking questions and bringing up old
Hola,
hurts.
William.
It was exhausting. I hope one day you'll
Hey,
understand that family is
gracias.
complicated. Maybe when you have your own kids, you'll see why Mom made the choices she made.
Y donde
I'm not
dentro
asking for an
del
apology.
horno
I just wanted you to know that we still love you,
va.
even if you've decided we're not good enough for you anymore. Your sister, Victoria. I read it twice. Then I folded
La
it
vida es
carefully and put it in a
central.
drawer. Marcus came home to find me at the kitchen table.
Se ve
What's
más
that?
rojo en el
Letter from Victoria.
centro.
What did she say? Nothing new. I stood up and started making dinner. She still doesn't get it. She
¿De
never will.
qué?
Does that bother you? I thought about it, really thought about it. No, I said finally. It's not my job to make her understand. It never was. A year after the wedding, life had settled into something beautiful.
Historia de
Marcus and
Drake.
I bought a house in the suburbs of Boston, a little Cape Cod with a big backyard, just
Pues
20 minutes from
bueno,
Richard and Eleanor. Close enough for Sunday dinners,
es historia.
far enough for privacy.
Exacto,
I was no longer
historia.
freelancing. A design agency had hired me as their
No
art
va a
director,
dejar de ser
a job I loved
historia,
so much it barely
pero
felt like work. Marcus was
todo
thriving
tiene
at
un
his architecture
comienzo y tiene
firm.
un final.
We were building a life together, literally and figuratively. And I was pregnant. Eleanor cried when we told her. Richard tried not to cry and
Pues
failed.
ahí con
Daniel's
su
kids were already
corazón
arguing about who would be the
creciente.
baby's favorite cousin. One
Sí,
Sunday
es como un
afternoon, Eleanor and I were setting
es
up the
como
nursery, painting the walls a soft
un
sage
tono
green,
de rosa
arranging tiny furniture that
y
seemed
luego se va
impossibly small.
abriendo
Have you thought about
con
names?
otros
Eleanor
tonos de
asked,
rosa.
holding up two different mobiles. Emily,
Esta
I said.
canción no
If it's a
es.
girl, Emily Grace Morrison. Eleanor's eyes welled up.
Lo
That's
reviso.
beautiful. The
Pero está
Morrison
bien
part is
más arriba.
non-negotiable. I smiled. I want her to have the name of the family that chose her mother.
Dreams
Eleanor
de
set down the mobiles and pulled me into a
Horse.
hug. You know, she said, when I saw you sitting alone in that restaurant,
¿Esta es la que
I
me
had no
sale?
idea we'd end up here. I just saw someone who needed kindness. You saved
No
my
hay
life that
otra, ¿eh?
night. No, sweetheart. She pulled back, holding my shoulders. You saved yourself. We just showed you it was possible. I looked around the nursery, at the crib we'd picked out together, at the rocking chair Richard had built by hand, at the life I'd created
Es
with
de
people who loved me
corta papel.
unconditionally.
Sí, sí, sí,
I
yo he
finally
hecho
had
copia y
everything I'd
pega.
always wanted.
Me
I was
sale,
home.
sí.
5 years to the
Me
day after I sat alone in
sale.
Harborview Grill. I sat at the head of a very different table.
Porque
The
me
Morrison
sale,
house was
vale,
chaos, the best kind.
perdón.
Emily, now 6 months old, was being passed from lap to lap like a
Esta es
tiny
otra
drooling treasure.
canción de ellos,
Daniel's kids were playing some
ellas.
complicated card game in the
Pero
corner. Sarah
no,
was arguing
la
with Marcus
de
about the proper
Dreams
way to
no
carve
me
a turkey.
sale.
Richard was sneaking extra pie
Porque
when he thought Eleanor wasn't
Dreams
looking. She was. All right, everyone. Eleanor clapped her hands.
es
Before we eat,
como,
we need a toast. She raised her glass and looked at
no
me.
sé,
Tori, would you do the honors?
o esta,
I
pero
stood,
esta
Emily
creo.
in my arms, and looked around the
Pero esto
table.
es un
At the
mix.
family I'd found, the family that had
Es que
found
la
me.
original
5 years ago
creo que no
tonight,
está.
I said. I was sitting alone in a restaurant wondering if I'd ever belong anywhere. I thought I was unlovable. I thought there was something wrong with me, that I was too much, too difficult, too dramatic. I paused, feeling Marcus's hand squeeze my knee under the
Esta, ya
table.
está.
Then a stranger named Eleanor Morrison came up to my table and said, "No one should eat alone on this day." And everything changed. Richard wiped his eyes. Eleanor was already crying.
Hola,
So
Vania.
here's my toast. I raised my glass. To family. Not the one we're born into, but the one we build, the one we choose, the
Yo
one
lo
that
veo
chooses us
rosa
back.
y detrás varios
To
corazones cada
family,
vez más
everyone
grandes, pero
echoed.
más
Glasses clinked.
transparentoso.
Emily
Sí,
gurgled.
exacto.
Richard finally got his extra piece of pie, tea,
Pero
and I
diría que
looked
todo
around at
eso
these
de las
people, my
nostalgia,
people, and
ujú,
felt something I'd
varias
spent my whole childhood chasing. I belonged.
era administradora del
Completely.
canal.
Unconditionally. For the first time in my
Fallaba la
life,
DJ,
I was
bueno.
home. After dinner,
No
Marcus and
siempre
I
se
sat
puede
on the
ser
back porch with
perfecto.
Emily asleep between us in her carrier. The November air was cold, but we were bundled in blankets, watching the stars emerge one by one. Do you ever think about them? Marcus asked quietly. Your bio parents? I considered the question. Sometimes, I admitted. In the middle of the night, mostly. I'll wonder how they're doing, if they've
Bye,
changed, if they ever really
antes.
understood what they lost.
Porque el
Do you
número
think
está
they
al
have?
revés.
Changed? I shook my head slowly.
¿Esto
People rarely do,
dices?
not in the ways that matter. Does that make you sad? I looked at Emily, her tiny fist curled near her cheek, her perfect rosebud mouth, her chest rising and falling
¿O
with
está
each peaceful breath.
respondiendo a alguien?
It used to, I said. But not anymore.
Feli.
I spent so many years being sad about a family that didn't want me.
Tus
I don't have
vidas
room for that
atando
anymore.
cordones y
My life is
que
too
te han
full.
sido útiles
Marcus wrapped his arm around me.
al lado
What
ningún
changed? I did. I leaned into him.
tatuajes
I stopped waiting for them to love me the way I
uno
needed.
aquí,
I stopped
una
shrinking myself
rosa
to fit into
y
their
uno
version of
aquí.
who I should be, and I started building something new.
Pregunto,
Through the window, I could see the Morrison family,
Feli,
my
parece que
family,
eres nuevo.
laughing and talking, clearing plates and wrapping
¿Cuánto tiempo
leftovers.
llevas en el canal?
Setting boundaries isn't
¿Y
revenge,
cuánto
I said softly.
tiempo
It's survival. It's choosing yourself when
llevará
no one
nuevo
else will.
espejo
Marcus
para
kissed my
que
forehead.
hoy,
I'm glad you survived. Me too.
después de años,
Emily stirred,
hagas
making
esa
soft baby
pregunta?
sounds. I picked her up and held her close. I'll never make you earn my love, I whispered to her. I promise. You'll never have to wonder if you're wanted. You'll always know. She yawned and fell back asleep. If you're watching this, and you've been the scapegoat of your family, if you've been told you're too much, or too sensitive, or always causing drama, just because you dared to ask to be treated fairly, I want you to know something. It's not you. It never was. You deserve to be chosen. Not as a backup, not as a last resort, not as the acceptable sacrifice when someone else's comfort is at stake. Chosen first, chosen fully, chosen without conditions. Family isn't blood. Family isn't obligation. Family isn't people who share your DNA but treat you like a burden. Family is the people who show up, the people who see you crying alone at a restaurant table and invite you to join them. The people who open their Sunday dinners and their hearts and their legal documents to make you officially, permanently, undeniably theirs. I spent 27 years trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it. And then I spent 5 years learning what love actually looks like. Not from the family I was born into, but from the family that chose me. If the people who are supposed to love you can't do that, if they've proven over and over again that you'll always come last, you have the right to build your own family. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to be happy. That's not revenge. That's not drama. That's just living your life without people who don't deserve a seat at your table. I found my people. And I hope, with all my heart, that you find yours too. You deserve it. Thank you so much for being here until the very end. If my story touched you in any way, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It really helps more people find these stories. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with your own family? Share your experience in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, check the description. I've linked some of my favorites there. Until next time, remember, you deserve to be chosen.